asked me the other day how I make my marshmallow fondant, and you ask and it is given. So I'm about to make my marshmallow fondant right now, and I wanted to show you how I do that, so stay tuned so you can see what I do. Okay, so to do this, you're going to need your KitchenAid mixer with the dough hook attachment. I like to use a glass bowl because I put it in the microwave. Marshmallows, I use either the big 16-ounce bag or this is a 12-ounce bag, I think. Oh no, this is 10. I use 1.5 of these. 10, so that would be 15 ounces or 16 ounces, whatever. I always eyeball it. So I'd say about a pound, 16 ounces is a pound, right? A pound of marshmallows. Some cornstarch that I have in a shaker container and some Crisco. And 2 pounds of powdered sugar. To start, I take a paper towel and I dip it in the Crisco, and I'm going to wipe the Crisco on the inside of the bowl, and then also wipe it on the dough hook here and a little bit on the inside of the bowl here. Then I'm going to do 1.5 bags of those marshmallows. And I just eyeball it. This recipe doesn't have to be exact. Oh, I also forgot to say you need corn syrup. Obviously, I'm a fan of Target with all this Market Pantry stuff. So, with the corn syrup, I eyeball everything. So, I'm going to say you need about a tablespoon of corn syrup. And then also, I would say about 2 tablespoons of water. And I put this in the microwave for 1 minute and 45 seconds. As that's in the microwave, I take my powdered sugar and I add about 2/3 of it to the bottom of the bowl. And then set this aside and then add the melted marshmallow mixture. Just took these out of the microwave, so now I mix them. And then add this whole thing to the bowl. And then I add almost the rest of the powdered sugar on top. I still leave a little bit in the bottom of the bag, so that's really just a little bit that I leave in. Shut this, and as always, I take a kitchen towel and put it on top to prevent the powdered sugar from splashing everywhere. Or it's not splashing, it doesn't splash, it poofs or creates a dust cloud or whatever. So I put this on low and just let it mix so it starts to incorporate everything together. Probably about a minute or 2. As that's mixing, I'm going to get my bowl ready to make my next batch. So taking the Crisco and wiping it on the bowl. Adding my 1.5 bags of marshmallows. Adding about a tablespoon of light corn syrup. And I'll do this over here. About 2 tablespoons of water. And putting this in the microwave for 1 minute 45. Then checking on this, it's still not really holding together that well. I'm going to add the rest of the sugar here. Keeping this on top so I don't get the cloud of sugar dust. Depending on how humid it depends on how much water I have to add to this or how much sugar. So you kind of have to see how this works out, just looking at the consistency. So now you can see in the bottom of this, how ghetto is this? My thing doesn't work, so I have to plug it and unplug it to turn it on and off, but whatever. So in the bottom of this, there is a lot of dry mixture. So in order to get rid of that, I'm going to add a little water. Add a little bit of water. A little bit goes a long way with this. So I'm just trying to dry up, not to dry up, I'm just trying to wet the mixture at the bottom so it incorporates. That was like half of this, and I'm going to see how that turns out. Still a little bit more in there, so I'm going to add a little more just to soak up all the dry crumbs down there at the bottom. So that in total, that was about 3/4 of this tablespoon. Then I turn it on high. And then I can unplug it. Well, turn it off if your thing actually, if your switch actually works. Now I'm going to take this out of here. So I'm taking some Crisco and I'm putting it on my clean countertop and rubbing it on my hands. Lift this up and I just take this off of the hook and then scoop it out of here and put it on the countertop. So rubbing more Crisco on my hands and then just starting to knead it together. And then I take some cornstarch and just sprinkle it on here and just roll this up in the cornstarch. And that's just going to prevent it from sticking to the plastic wrap that I wrap it in. Then I have this piece of plastic wrap. I put this on here, wrap it up, and then I put it in an airtight container. And there's your white marshmallow fondant. Now let's make the black fondant. So again, I have that marshmallow mixture in the microwave, and I'm going to do about 2/3 of the bag. And now I'm going to stir this. This is where you want to add any coloring. So whatever color you want to do, add it to the marshmallows and then add that to the sugar if you're going to dye the whole batch. If you're only going to do a part of it, then obviously make it white and then dye it in sections. Black takes a lot. So I add it and then stir and then add and stir to see how deep of the color I can get. This is why when I have to cover cakes or when I have to make dark cakes, navy blue, sometimes red, definitely black, I always cover them in fondant, because if you're adding all of this coloring to icing, that's kind of disgusting and it can alter the taste. But I always put a nice thick layer of icing underneath my fondant so people can just eat around that. So that's a good color for the black. And do the same thing. Pour it into the mixer. And then pour a little more of the powdered sugar back on top and still leave some in the bag. And turn this on and let it mix. Okay, so now I turn this off and it's still too runny, so I want to add more sugar. If it was really stiff, I would want to add more water. So I'm going to turn this on, cover it part way to prevent the dust cloud, or to prevent the sugar cloud, and start adding a little sugar at a time. That was about a 1/2 cup more. Let it incorporate. And you can see it starts forming, like it starts sticking together on the dough hook. That's when you know it's getting to a better consistency. If it's sticking to the side of the bowl and it's really kind of thick and sticky, it's not ready yet. So I'm going to add the rest of the sugar. You don't want to add too much sugar because then your fondant is going to be dry. So it really just comes from working with this. It's hard for me to give exact measurements, as humidity and weather always plays a factor in how much water or sugar that I add to this recipe. Alright, right here you can see, I'm just going to turn this up for a second. Now, the fondant is basically sticking to the dough hook, so I know that that is pretty good. Now, it still falls down when I lift it up, so it still has a good consistency to it. It's still a little sticky, but it's mainly sticking to the dough hook. That's how I know that it's finished. And again, I'm going to take this Crisco here, rub it in my hands and on the countertop so it doesn't stick. And then take it out of the bowl and put it on the countertop and knead it together. Making fondant is not one of my favorite things to do, but it tastes so much better than store-bought fondant, and it's so much cheaper to make. And now just start kneading it together. There we go. Sprinkle some cornstarch, and I roll it in the cornstarch so it won't stick to the plastic. And then I have the food plastic here, and just wrap that up. Making sure that it's totally sealed by the plastic. And there's your black marshmallow fondant. So here you go. Here's your marshmallow fondant all wrapped up and ready to go. What I do with this is I have a big Tupperware container that has a lid. Obviously, don't they all have lids? And I just seal that. I put all my fondant in there. I usually make my fondant the day before I'm going to knead it. It does need time to settle after you make it because it's still hot, and it will be too hot. It will be too hot for you to work with. So it needs to cool down a little bit. I use this Tylose powder. This is a little, I can link this below. This Tylose powder makes fondant firm like gum paste. It'll dry really hard. A little bit of this goes a long way, but when I'm making decorations and something that has to dry hard, I add a little bit of Tylose powder to the fondant. I knead it into the fondant and then roll it out and let it sit for about, I don't know, between 10 and 20 minutes for it to stiffen up, and then I can start cutting decorations out of the fondant. With marshmallow fondant, I find that I prefer to make it, I think I said this in the video, but it tastes a lot better than the store-bought fondant, and it's so much cheaper. Like a bag of marshmallows and a bag of sugar, and you know, it costs less than $5 to make a batch of it. It holds really well in that plastic container, sealed tight. You want to keep it wrapped in the plastic wrap as well. And also, before I use it, I pop it in the microwave to soften it up so it's more pliable and easier to use. If I have to color the fondant, I'll break a piece of it off, pop it in the microwave for 10 to 20 seconds depending on how big that piece is. You have to watch it because it melts pretty fast. And then add the color that you want to use and knead that into the fondant as well. I think those are the basics with the fondant. So if you have any questions about making the fondant or working with it, just leave it below and I'll answer them as soon as I can. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And you can follow me on social media. I am on Instagram and Facebook, and I have my website. I will link all of them below. And I think that's it for now. So I will see you on the next one. Bye.